Hey, Tony Vlahos here for ExecuNet, and I'm joined today by Jeff Hyman, and we're going to be talking about executive search. What else? So, if you're someone who is thinking about making a change and wondering what the terrain ahead looks like or will look like in the next few months, or you are currently in transition or wondering what you're in for as we near year end and begin 2020. I can't believe we're talking about 2020, Jeff. You should listen up because Jeff will give you his sense of what lies ahead. Of course, Jeff is on a simple mission: recruit rock stars and teach others to do the same. He launched his recruiting career at Hydrick Struggles and Spencer Stewart, which of course are the preeminent global executive search firms. Today, he's Chief Talent Officer at Chicago-based Strong Suit Executive Search. And of course, he's the author of the best-selling book I mentioned moments ago, Recruit Rock Stars, the 10-step playbook to find the winners and ignite your business. With that, welcome, Jeff. Good to be talking to you.
Always fun to do it, Tony. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. So
Good.
let's dive right into it. If
Sure.
we're thinking about making a change, let's say I'm an executive who's in role and I'm thinking about making a change in the next few months to half a year,
Yeah.
what am I in for? What should I be thinking about mostly?
Well, I think the first thing is, I've been through the transition. Many of our listeners have been through the transition. No one's going to convince you that the transition is fun and not filled with some stress. So you have to kind of understand that comes with the territory, but also a sense of optimism. There's never been a better time to make a change. I don't anticipate that cooling off anytime soon. Our listeners probably know that we're at a record low or 50-year low unemployment rate in the US. We're at 3.5%. That's pretty much full employment. There are some cities that are well below that at 1.52% unemployment. So there's never been a better time to make a change. If you're unhappy, if you're frustrated, if you're tired of working for a micromanager, there's never been a better time to make a change. That said, you do have to set your expectations appropriately. Executive roles, just because of the shape of a corporate pyramid, they're fewer and further between, and you don't want to leave one role just to take another role. That's I know that it's tempting to do that, but uh, it's usually a mistake. And so, waiting for the right role, waiting for your right pitch, just like Warren Buffett does in investing, you wait for that one pitch and you crack it, and you'll never be happier. That could take 3 months. It could take 6 months. I know executives, it could take 12 months. Uh, but there's never been a better time to start that process.
Mhm. Are there certain steps that executives normally take which you wish they wouldn't when they're embarking on their search? What are some of those, I'll call
One
them
of the big,
missteps?
yeah, one of the biggest missteps this time of year, honestly, Tony, is people will say, "Well, it's the holidays, or the holidays are coming up, so it's a bad time to look for a job." I don't buy that. I haven't seen that, and because so many people do that, they say, "I'll wait till January to start looking." I actually think you can put yourself at quite an advantage looking over the holidays. Um, you have to set your expectations. Things do move slower. People are busy. They're traveling. That said, companies are hiring left and right. And
Mhm.
even December 24th, if you can get an offer in your hand for a role that you're qualified for, more power to you. So I wouldn't make the mistake or take the temptation of waiting till January 3rd.
Mhm. And it tends to be a great time to network as well, correct?
Sure,
So I
absolutely.
think some of the concerns that executives have voiced to us here at ExecuNet is, I don't know how to do that, let alone during the holiday season. How do I come across as someone who is a viable candidate for a position without tipping my hand that I'm actually looking for a job? How do you do that?
Well, there's nothing wrong with tipping your hand in a discreet way, but you know, I always tell people networking is the most likely way that you're going to find your next role. 80, 90% of the time. It's not going to be through headhunters like me. Just statistically, headhunters handle a very, very small portion of the number of job changes or company changes, just statistically. Same with job boards, online job listings. Of course, you should review them, sign up for them, subscribe to them. ExecuNet is wonderful. But if I was a betting man, I would bet you're going to find your next role through networking. The mistake I see people make is they assume that means spending their times Thursday nights at cocktail events and networking events, and that's not what I'm talking about. I've been to more of those than I care to admit, and I generally find they're not a great use of time for finding your next role. Purposeful networking, which means, and we did a session on this, I think last year, Tony, or
Yes.
earlier this year, starting with a target list of 20 or 30 companies that interest you, identifying within those companies who you need to get in front of, and then networking your way to them, figuring out your network and theirs and what's the overlap, how can you get in front of them. That to me is purposeful networking. Cocktail party networking is random networking. You never know who you're going to meet. And I just don't find it's a good use of time.
Right. Great advice. So let's talk, Jeff, about the senior level executive who's actually been in search for, say, a few months, knowing that the journey could take, what, 9 months, a year or longer,
Easily. Sure.
and they're stumbling, they're struggling, they're not finding any progress is being made, and they're doing the same old things.
Yeah.
Let's talk about how they can change their strategy a bit to achieve results faster.
Well, I think you said it, Tony, which is they're doing the same old things.
Mm.
And most people that go through this process do the same old things. They try to play the law of large numbers. They send out a million resumes and a million cover letters. They all sound the same. As an executive recruiter, I see many unsolicited every week, and it's mind numbing. They all look the same. So, by definition, you improve your odds by not doing the same as everybody else, which means uh, start with a very short target list of companies that are of interest to you and go very, very deep on them. And I know that can be disconcerting because you're like, well, focusing on 10 or 20 or 30 companies, I want to focus on 300. You can't know enough about 300 companies to impress an executive or a headhunter or get their attention, but you can master 10 or 20 or 30.
Mhm.
They could be in one or two industries. They could be a particular personal interest to you. You could have a passion for them. And don't make the mistake of assuming that just because you don't see your role posted or out there, let's say you're looking for a chief marketing officer role and you look at a company that's of interest to you, and lo and behold, they have a chief marketing officer, you could be tempted to say, well, they've got a CMO. I'm not going to waste my time. And I would say, and this was in the Wall Street Journal today, CMO tenure is at a record low. The turnover for CMOs is increasing. And so what that means is you don't know if that CMO's manager, the CEO, is happy with him or her or not until you inquire. And many of these things never go out to search, right? We never get engaged as headhunters, but that CEO is always looking for their backfill, for their replacement. He just hasn't pulled the trigger, or she hasn't decided to part ways with her CMO yet. So don't assume anything.
Right. Very smart thinking. So along those lines, Jeff, if you are a corporate executive, it's what you've always done and you're determined to stay in corporate life. Is that always a great idea? What other options, in other words, should executives potentially explore as they're thinking through their next chapter?
Well, there's a number of paths. And if corporate life is making you miserable, odds are you go to another big corporate life and you're still going to be miserable. Um, and I do think that I see more senior people saying this rat race is just it's too much. So there's a couple of paths. One is a smaller company, perhaps private equity backed, perhaps venture capital backed. That doesn't necessarily mean a 10-person startup. I'm not only talking about that. There's a huge range in between. Uh, there's a record amount of money sitting on the sidelines from private equity firms, $3.5 trillion. So PE has never been more active, and we have a session coming up on that soon.
Mhm.
Um, they're always looking for experts, industry experts, etc. You could join some of those boards and perhaps uh, work into the company that way through the back door. You can join advisory boards. You could hang out your shingle and work with a number of firms as a consultant. You'll make more on an hourly basis, I can assure you, than you would make at a big company. And the myth that, well, that has lower job security is just not true. You're no more safe, no safer at a large company than you are hanging out your shingle and having two or three clients, which gives you some diversity, gives you some interesting intellectual challenge. And P.S., I've run the numbers, you'll probably make more money. So I see a lot of people shy away from that path. I think that path makes a lot of sense, especially later in your career where you do have a lot to offer. You do have expertise on an industry. You do know a market inside and out, there's a lot of companies that'll pay you for that expertise.
Wonderful advice. Thank you, Jeff, for sharing with our audience and with me, of course, how to move forward from where we are and also explore our options as fully as we possibly can. And Jeff mentioned we have a session coming up together, an ExecuNet Masterclass session on November 21st on private equity, and that'll be a lot of fun. And tune in if you want
Yes.
to learn all about that.
Great.
Thank you again. Enjoy the snow in Chicago.
Thanks, Tony.
All right, bye for now.